We have plenty to discuss here in today's video, including some trade talk around a handful of teams going into the beginning of the NHL season. Today's trade talk revolves around teams like the Toronto Maple Leafs, as well as the Boston Bruins and the Washington Capitals. We also have some updates which could lead to trades for players like Luke Evangelista, maybe even Jerard Kaprizov. We'll discuss the latest there, plus the latest on the Connor McDavid contract situation. Frank Seravalli makes some good points on a strategy that might be used to get a deal done, but they have to do it this week if that strategy was to work. Some big injury updates on players like Vasilevsky, as well as Hellebuyck, JT Miller, and Samberg in Winnipeg. Plus, we have a lot of players on NHL waivers here again today, and big news on next year's hockey calendar for the beginning of the 26-27 season. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss here in today's video. One update I wanted to start with today was on this day next year, according to NHL insider and TSN analyst Pierre LeBrun, and of course writer for The Athletic as well, Pierre says that it's his understanding, based on inside sources, that this day, September 29th, next year, we will be having the first NHL games of the 26-27 regular season. Of course, we had heard that speculation before when the new CBA was being finalized, that with the addition of 2 extra games going to an 84-game season, that they would likely have to start the regular season games a little bit earlier, towards the end of September, get like at least an extra week of NHL calendar in the mix there. The goal is to still have the season end the same time or earlier, which is, even better. So we'll see. Of course, next year won't be an Olympic year. We had 4 nations the year before, so a little bit different with some extended breaks in there. We could probably have next season have the Stanley Cup awarded a little bit earlier in June. Instead of having it guaranteed by late June, we could probably have it more of a guarantee by like the 15th or something, and then still have like the draft a week later, and then even free agency a week after that, if they really wanted to build more time between those 2 major events in the calendar, which I know has been a big reason for the concern by a lot of GMs and management teams that wanted to go with a decentralized draft, is just because there's so much in such a condensed period of time that with a new calendar in that sense, they might be able to maybe change the formats and kind of do things in a different way, but we'll see. Either way, this time next year, we should be talking about the first day of the NHL's regular season. Now, as I mentioned, we have a lot more waiver wire activity here today. Well over 20 players again on waivers. All of the players that we talked about being on waivers yesterday cleared, so they've been able to be reassigned to their NHL minor league affiliates. Here is the list of today's players on waivers. I'm not really sure we're going to see a claim today either, but we're getting to that point over the next couple of days where it's kind of getting more and more likely, because you're going to see some more interesting names coming up, and that's part of what we're going to talk about a little later in the video as well. But today we have Carolina Hurricanes have Skyler Brind'Amour, that is the son of Rod Brind'Amour, and Ronan Seeley. The Minnesota Wild have a few players, including Nicholas Aube-Kubel, Ben Gleason, Matt Kiersted, and Ben Jones. The Nashville Predators have a few here as well, including Kevin Gravel, Jake Lucchini, goaltender Matt Murray, Navran Mutter, and Jordan Osterley. The New York Rangers have a few players, including Anton Bleed, Justin Dowling, and Trey Fix-Polanski, along with Derek Pouliot. The Philadelphia Flyers have defenseman Helge Grans. The Vancouver Canucks have Joe Labate, Mackenzie McEachern, goaltender Yuri Patera, and defenseman Jimmy Schultz. And the Winnipeg Jets have Philip Di Giuseppe and Mason Shaw. So that's another long list of players on waivers. There's maybe 1 or 2 every day. I think there's 1 or 2 that maybe teams look at, and it's not so much that they maybe wouldn't be looked upon differently at a different point in the year, but a lot of teams are still making cuts. They're still kind of deciding what they have, so it's less likely you see the goaltenders is kind of the main one that you kind of see teams looking at, because it's obviously, it's a different kind of position. So we'll have to see here how the waiver process goes in the coming days, but we're going to talk about a few names to watch here in the next session, because those players could possibly be traded as well. Now, as I mentioned, a few interesting cases to watch with injuries. Tampa Bay Lightning star goaltender Andrei Vasilevsky has still not been on the ice in training camp here for a number of days with the main group. He's been supposedly skating on his own a bit, according to head coach John Cooper. Cooper's still saying that he expects Vasilevsky to be ready for the start of the year. They wouldn't rule out that he could play and before the preseason's over. They also haven't confirmed it either. We don't really know what is going on with him. So it just kind of creates a question mark. That situation continues to persist there for Tampa. Same goes for Winnipeg. Hellebuck also has been, I guess, not feeling just right and has yet to appear in preseason action. So I think some people are mildly concerned, but we don't really have any kind of updates again there either to suggest he won't be ready for opening night or that he's going to miss time or anything of that nature. But we do know in Winnipeg they are going to be without defenseman Dylan Samberg, who had a bit of a freak accident injury the other day, but he is now dealing with a broken wrist and is going to be out for about 2 months. So considering where we're at in the season, he's going to miss anywhere from 6 to 7 weeks to open the campaign, which is bad news. Samberg's really grown his role within the Jets D-corps the past couple of years. And, he signed a new deal this offseason, and obviously that's not going to be the way he wants to start this year. It's not good for the team either. It's going to be a big blow that they'll have to manage through. And newly appointed Rangers captain JT Miller did leave practice today dealing with a leg injury. All indications from reporters, though, tonight say that they think he's going to be fine. He might miss a day or so of training, but it's possible that he even gets on the ice tomorrow. It's not even a given yet. So obviously, whatever the injury is fairly minor and shouldn't stop him from being ready when the season starts, which we're a week away from that. Now, on the rumor front, we'll get into a few different things here. Let's start with some players that could be waiver claims, but they could also be traded or even kept on the roster a little longer because their teams know that they are a lot more likely to be claimed if they are placed on waivers. That's a couple of goaltenders, and a lot of this information today comes from Elliot Friedman in his latest podcast. But the names to watch here, names are not really new if you watch this channel. We've talked about them here before since the beginning of training camp, and even towards the end of the offseason before camp got going. But Michael DiPietro is a name. He's obviously really developed the last couple of years, and obviously still not really established at the NHL level, but one of the better options of the number 3 guys around the league that have solid performances at the minor league level that are, at this point kind of due to get an opportunity. I know within the Bruins organization there were some rumblings in the offseason that they may trade Jonas Korpisalo after just one season. I know Korpisalo appeared to be a little bit unhappy with his role last year, not playing enough. He wants to play more. If Swayman plays better this year, I don't see them being able to accommodate that. Korpisalo wasn't the greatest for them last year. Hasn't really been great the last few years. Had a decent run with the Kings before he got his contract, which led to him getting his contract with Ottawa. One bad season there, he got traded, and then another not so great season in Boston. So we will see where that goes, but for right now, Korpisalo is still with the Bruins, we don't know of any trade coming down the pipe here with him. So DiPietro is a player that the Bruins are going to be at risk to lose through waivers if they don't move him ahead of time. Maybe they try to stash him on the roster if they can figure that out and carry 3 goalies for a little while. I'm not sure. But he's definitely getting attention from other teams. Another name in that same kind of category is Washington Capitals goalie Clay Stevenson, who certainly raised some eyebrows and got some attention throughout the early part of training camp and preseason here so far. Again, the Washington Capitals are likely aware of this, that it's going to be a high-risk move to put him on waivers. But depending on every team's cap situation, sometimes they don't have a choice. I'm sure they're probably going to be both these teams getting calls on these guys saying, okay, before you put them on waivers, could we maybe work out a trade so that the teams make sure that they get them, especially if a team really wants one of these guys that may not be super low on the pecking order. So in case you don't know, until you're 20 games into the new regular season, the order of claiming players on waivers is by the final standings of last year. So, depending on if there's a top 10 team last year that needs a goalie in an emergency basis or dealing with injuries or what have you, wants a different situation, wants to make a move, they may have a tough time doing that, right? So we will see where that goes. But both of those goaltenders could be placed on waivers. They'd be, like I said, highly likely to be picked up. And it wouldn't be shocking if they were traded so that the teams don't lose them for nothing. Or the other option, like I said, for both of them, if the teams can figure out doing it is keeping him on the roster as a third, at least for a little while until they figure out the next move, so to speak. So we will see, but those goalies are definitely going to be names to watch. One name that we're probably not going to be hearing about is former Maple Leaf, former Canadian, former Capital, Max Pacioretty. Of course, played last year with the Leafs, had a decent year. He definitely continued to have health issues and did miss time with injuries again after having a lot of missed time the past couple of years. But he played enough that I really thought he would probably continue that. Scored some big goals for the Leafs in the playoffs. Definitely not the player he was in his prime, but it looked like he could still be a role player. But it looks like he's going to hang him up. Now, he has not, I stress not, officially announced his retirement. However, I know Nick Alberga, who works with Daily Faceoff and has a Leafs-based podcast, was talking or posted today that he believes, with his sources information, to confirm that Pacioretty is taking a job with the University of Michigan. So if he's going to be working there, then clearly he's not going to be playing on the NHL. So that's kind of made everybody put two and two together that he's likely going to be announcing his retirement. But not all players rush into that. Maybe he'll see where things go. Maybe an offer comes along partway through the season he wants to consider. Until he announces his retirement, we can't say for certain. But it sure looks like we shouldn't expect him at least to grab a PTO or a contract before the season starts. He did play a little bit of college hockey with University of Michigan before going to the NHL. So obviously has connections to that school. But so it looks like Pacioretty's done. But we'll have to wait and see and get confirmation on his future plans here from himself or the NHLPA. If he goes through them to make an announcement, we'll have to wait and see. But talking about former Leafs, or soon to be former Leafs, I know Cam Robertson, who's well connected, normally works more so in the prospect world, but definitely has some intel, especially on younger players. Says that he's hearing that Nick Robertson of the Maple Leafs name is resurfacing and has been out there quite a bit lately. Says he's a name to watch, which is not surprising. We've heard from a number of insiders in the last, well, especially since camp started, even towards the end of the season, even though Nick Robertson signed a new deal with the Leafs, that he was very much still very likely to be traded, that when they signed that contract, I wanted to make sure that it would still be attractive for trade. And now that we're further along through camp, we know that they still have a gluttony of forwards here. They have to move some for sure. He would have more value than a guy like Kampf, who they've been trying to move and have difficulty doing so and could end up on waivers. But Robertson, according to Cam Robertson, Nick Robertson has been linked to the San Jose Sharks. Could be a landing spot for him. We know they've kind of been accumulating younger players. They also do have a lot of players too, so I'm not sure how they see him fitting there. But of course, obviously Robertson has connections to California. I'm sure he'd be okay going there if he's going to leave the Leafs. Basically, based on listening to him talk when he has spoke to the media in training camp, it's kind of like, I'm here for now until something happens, basically. And I think he understands. Same thing with David Kampf. They all kind of understand that they're on the outside looking in and might not have a role. With Nick Robertson, like I said, I think he has to play a top 9 role. I don't see him being a fourth line type of player. And if you don't think you have a real spot where he fits, then after all this time, it does make sense to find a new spot for him. So we'll see. According to Robertson should be on the move soon. It could be the Sharks might be the landing spot. We'll have to wait and see on that front. Now, some other situations to watch. Frank Saravalli talk about Connor McDavid. Now, this situation, of course, has a little bit of a pressure point coming up, and that's opening night of the NHL regular season. Now, it doesn't mean if McDavid doesn't sign an extension before the season starts that he's a goner. Doesn't mean it won't happen. However, I do think that there's going to be not much of an incentive for McDavid's camp to really talk to the Oilers and sit down and make it a priority. Once the season starts, you want to put the focus on hockey, getting back to the Stanley Cup if they can. And like I said, it's not that they won't talk. It's not that McDavid won't sign. But it's going to have to be a situation where McDavid basically says to his agent, like, I want this done, get it done. If they're willing to still be patient and think about things, then there's not going to be any reason to get it. There's no pressure point once the season starts, unless you want that distraction done in the future already decided ahead of time. But Frank Saravalli made a really good point today talking to Bob Stauffer, of course, on his Oilers-based program, saying that one thing that people should consider here is that there's only 7 days left until the regular season. And the other thing that comes with that is that you won't be able to do contracts with deferred money anymore once the season starts. So, of course, if McDavid wants to still be paid very appropriately and still kind of maximize higher earnings, but at the same time help the team lower the AAV and create a little bit more cap flexibility to build around him to be as competitive as he wants them to be over whatever time frame he wants to sign for, that a contract with deferred money might be the way to go here to keep the AAV down and to keep the flexibility there that obviously McDavid's looking for. He's made it perfectly clear this is not all about money, but to some degree, even if he's willing to take a little bit less, they could still use the deferred money to make it even better. And they only have a week to do that. Once the season starts, that option is off the table. So I would think that the Edmonton Oilers would be all over that idea and that concept, trying to talk to McDavid about that idea and structuring things that way to still pay him a lot of money, but not have it all paid out up front so that it affects the AAV as much. They get a bit of a savings and can continue to do what he wants them to do, make the team as Stanley Cup ready every year. So we will see if that kind of moves things along, if that strategy is being utilized. I know, again, Friedman's comments today on the Fan Hockey Show about the McDavid situation basically was that he thinks it's going to be a lower number than expected if he signs, but Elliott's still using the word if, right? So people are still unsure how this is going to go. And with all the reporters, though, saying that don't be surprised if it's less of a cap hit, that could be the way they make that happen, but still getting him the money that he well deserves. So a situation to monitor for sure in the next week. If it drags on beyond that, all bets are off, I think. And it's going to create a stressful distraction for the Oilers that they absolutely just don't need. I know what McDavid has said. I don't completely disagree with him that the team should be able to focus on the game and not have it as a distraction, but I don't know that it's really possible. If you're all the other members of that team that have a vested interest and a long-term commitment, you're going to be concerned. So we will see where things go on that front. Another one, of course, Luke Evangelista with Nashville. Still another unsigned, restricted free agent right now. Friedman's comment on that situation today on his podcast was that he says it seems like the Evangelista can't have a number, and they've said this is our number, and they've barely budged at all the entire time, which is why this is dragging on. And he honestly says, I don't know how this gets solved. Neither side is budging here. They're both kind of dug in. They have their numbers, and they're not moving. That's why I keep wondering if it's possible this leads to trade. I know, looking at all the top RFAs that have gone an extended time into the offseason without a contract, a lot of reporters pegged this one to be, if there one was going to lead to a trade, this would be the more likely one, given Nashville's maybe bigger appetite to be willing to change things up. Whereas, like I said, you didn't really see the Ducks having an appetite to trade McTavish. You don't see the Devils having an appetite to trade Luke Hughes. Obviously those situations, could have gotten to that point, but they didn't let it because it wasn't really something they really wanted to do. But, is Evangelista a big enough part of Nashville? Are they in a situation where, again, having a disappointing year, that they might be more willing to say, the heck with this, we're making a change? And so we'll see what happens. But both sides dug in with no end in sight with the Nashville Predators and Luke Evangelista. Kirill Kaprizov, another interesting situation. The comments seem to be changing a little bit here on this one. The comments from Elliotte Friedman today says that he thinks the Minnesota Wild are honestly starting to wonder, does he want to be here? And that is terrible if that's the case. They're starting to wonder if he wants to be there. Are we negotiating against ourselves? Is there any point in continuing to, do more and more? Because like we heard before, we didn't think the Wild, based on reports, really had much of an appetite to continue increasing the offer. They already offered him the richest contract in NHL history. There didn't seem to be much of a counter, if you will, saying, well, that's good. We like the numbers, but we want to do a shorter term, or we want this, or we want that. It was just like, okay, we'll review the offer. Like, yeah, no, that doesn't work. It didn't seem to be as much of a back and forth. It's not like you keep hearing that they're working hard, grinding away. It's kind of like the Wild make this big push, this big offer, and the answer is no. And then it's just kind of, we haven't really heard a lot of back and forth since. So it makes sense what Elliott's saying here, that they're really having some serious internal debates on, does he really want to be here? And ultimately we'll find out, I guess, in due time. But I feel terrible for the Wild if that's the case, because they waited a long time for him to come from Russia. They've treated him extremely well. They've paid him extremely well. He's such a huge part of that team. And for him to walk as a UFA as early as he can, it would be a massive blow to that team. So we will see what happens. But obviously, again, like McDavid, there's not really a major pressure point just yet. Once the season starts, there's lots of an incentive for them to keep talking. So again, interesting times. It could lead to some big names in free agency next year, but it's just kind of odd to think about how many of them could be pushing for that, right? So we'll see what happens. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.